who will be the host for today's webinar. The Australian Consulate-General in Makassar, in collaboration with Rumata Artspace in Makassar, Buku-Larrŋgay Mulka Art Centre in Yirrkala, and Laureate Global Encounters, Monash Indigenous Studies Centre, organized this virtual seminar and exhibitions to celebrate the historical links between Makassar and Yolŋu tribes in Australia as part of NAIDOC Week celebrations. NAIDOC Week celebrations are held to celebrate the history, culture, and achievements of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. This week is a great opportunity for all of us to participate in a range of activities conducted during NAIDOC Week 2020 celebrations, such as this webinar event, to gain deeper understanding about the long-lasting relations between Australia and Indonesia. Today's webinar will explore Makassar-Yolŋu history since the 18th century and feature a keynote lecture by Professor Lynette Russell AM, a Chief Investigator of Laureate Global Encounters, Monash Indigenous Studies Centre. Followed by a presentation by Dr. Yulianti Farid and Fikri Yathir, also from Laureate Global Encounters, tracing the arrival of Aboriginal Australians into Makassar, as well as presentation from Andi Buyung Saputra from AMAN, or the South Sulawesi Indigenous Peoples Alliance. I would like to inform everyone that this event is recorded, and the recorded video will be posted on the YouTube channel of the Rumata Artspace Makassar. And this information will be shared on all social media channels of the Australian Consulate-General and Rumata Artspace Makassar. All the presentations materials will be available both in English and Bahasa Indonesia after the event. We also provide a sign language interpreter to help individuals with specific needs to understand a spoken language by converting it into sign language. Before we start, let me encourage you to pay attention to the speakers and raise a question, because there will be a giveaway for the best questioner. To begin this webinar, we are pleased and very honored to have the Consul General of the Australian Consulate-General in Makassar, Ms. Bronwyn Robbins, to deliver the opening remarks in Bahasa Indonesia. For those who is not a native Indonesians or not understand Bahasa Indonesia, the Consul General's speech in English will be posted on the chat room for you to read. Distinguished participants, please welcome the Consul General Bronwyn Robbins.
In celebration of NAIDOC Week, I pay my respects to Australia's First Nations peoples and their continuing connection to land and waters. I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander artists, speakers and participants joining us today. Merupakan suatu kehormatan memiliki kesempatan untuk berbicara dengan Anda hari ini dalam perayaan Pekan NAIDOC 2020. Pekan NAIDOC dirayakan di seluruh Australia setiap tahun untuk menghormati pencapaian budaya dinamis dan sejarah masyarakat aborigin dan penduduk pribumi Selat Torres. NAIDOC adalah singkatan dari National Aborigines and Islanders Day Observance Committee. Dan meskipun komiti tersebut sudah tidak ada lagi, akronim tersebut terus digunakan hingga saat ini. NAIDOC dirayakan tidak hanya di komunitas adat, tetapi oleh orang Australia dari semua lapisan masyarakat. Ini merupakan suatu kesempatan untuk mempelajari lebih lanjut tentang komunitas aborigin dan penduduk pribumi Selat Torres. Ini tentang melihat, mendengar, dan mempelajari lebih dari 65,000 tahun sejarah pribumi Australia. Tema NAIDOC Week tahun 2020, Always Was, Always Will Be, mengakui bahwa para pribumi telah menduduki dan merawat benua Australia selama lebih dari 65.000 tahun. Sejarah Australia tidak dimulai dengan kontak Eropa pertama yang terdokumentasi 3 sampai 400 tahun yang lalu, melainkan dengan fondasi salah satu budaya berkelanjutan terpanjang di dunia yang berasal dari ribuan generasi. Orang aborigin dan penduduk pribumi Selat Torres adalah penjaga budaya tertua yang masih ada di dunia. Mereka adalah penjelajah pertama Australia, navigator pertama, insinyur pertama, petani pertama, ahli botani pertama, ilmuwan pertama, diplomat pertama, astronom pertama, seniman pertama, dan penulis cerita lisan tertua di dunia. Dan yang sangat penting untuk tema diskusi kita hari ini, mereka adalah pedagang pertama di Australia. Dari setidaknya tahun 1700-an, pelaut dari Makassar berlayar ke pantai utara Australia. Mereka bertemu, berdagang, dan bekerja dengan Yolŋu dari timur laut Arnhem Land. Dengan menggunakan angan muson, para pelaut ini biasa melakukan perjalanan jauh dan berbahaya dari Sulawesi ke pantai utara Australia setiap tahun untuk memanen teripang atau dikenal sebagai beshtemur atau siput laut. Sebagai gantinya, mereka menawarkan pisau logam, kain, dan tembakau ke Yolŋu. Interaksi awal antara Yolŋu dan orang Makassar ini mewakili salah satu interaksi pertama yang diketahui antara Australia dan Indonesia dan tetap menjadi landasan utama dalam sejarah hubungan bilateral kita hingga hari ini. Kesenian dinding batu yang luas dijuliri di Wellington Ranges di Arnhem Land mencakup sekitar 1.500 lukisan yang mencatat sejarah kontak aborigin, termasuk dengan pelaut dari Makassar. Kunjungan ini masih direkam dan dirayakan dalam musik dan tarian Yolŋu dan seperti yang akan kita lihat sekarang dalam pameran seni Australia dan Indonesia. Dan sampai hari ini, kata-kata bahasa Indonesia tetap terjalin dalam bahasa orang Yolŋu di Australia Utara. Kata bulan, kemeja, batu, dan gula adalah di antara sekitar 200 kata yang dibagikan antara orang Yolŋu dan Indonesia. Dalam webinar hari ini, kita akan mempelajari lebih lanjut tentang interaksi awal ini melalui kuliah utama oleh Profesor Lynette Russell, AM, Kepala Penyelidik Proyek Global Encounters and First Nations People di Monash University Indigenous Studies Centre, yang akan memberitahu kita bagaimana kita semua terhubung melalui laut dari penyeberangan laut paling awal oleh para pencari teripang dari Makassar hingga penjelajah Eropa. Ibu Dr. Yulianti Farid, Postdoctoral Research Fellow di Monash Indigenous Studies Centre, dan Fikri Yathir, In-Country Research Assistant, kemudian akan mempresentasikan temuan penelitian mereka yang sedang berjalan tentang orang aborigin di Makassar dari periode teripang hingga saat ini. Kami akan menyelesaikan webinar dengan video oleh Pak Buyung dari Aman, Aliansi Masyarakat Adat Sulawesi Selatan tentang masyarakat adat di Sulawesi Selatan. Sebagai lanjutan dari webinar, kita akan belajar tentang peran interaksi awal ini dalam memengaruhi karya seniman dari Yirrkala dan Makassar. Pameran virtual kami akan dimulai dengan tur video pusat seni Buku-Larrŋgay Mulka dipandu oleh wanita Yolŋu, Siena Stubbs, dan Rumata Artspace di Makassar dipandu oleh wanita dari Makassar, Febri Hasanah. Siena dan Febri bertemu untuk pertama kalinya pada tahun 2018 dalam program pertukaran seniman yang didanai oleh Australian Indonesia Centre, dan mereka menggambarkan persahabatan mereka sebagai bertemu dengan saudara perempuan saya yang hilang, karena mereka langsung merasakan hubungan melalui budaya dan sejarah yang diciptakan oleh nenek moyang. Saya mengucapkan terima kasih kepada Rumata Artspace, khususnya Ibu Dr. Lili Yulianti Farid, yang telah bermitra dengan Consulate-General Australia di Makassar untuk menyelenggarakan perayaan Pekan NAIDOC hari ini. Saya juga ingin berterima kasih kepada kontributor lain untuk acara ini. Pusat Seni Buku-Larrŋgay Mulka di Yirrkala, Profesor Russell, dan Pusat Studi Pribumi Monash University, serta AMA. Harapan saya semoga perayaan ini terus mempererat persahabatan yang sangat hangat dan lama antara Australia dan tetangga dekat kita di Sulawesi Selatan. Saya harap Anda menikmati acara khusus ini yang merupakan bagian dari sejarah bersama kita dan yang menghubungkan kembali komunitas pribumi di Australia dan Indonesia. Sekarang saya akan menyerahkan kembali kepada rekan saya, Lulu Purnamasari dari Consulate-General Australia di Makassar, untuk memimpin kita ke bagian selanjutnya dari webinar hari ini. Terima kasih, Mayeka.
Thank you, Consul General. It was such a wonderful remarks. I know that the 2020 theme for NAIDOC Week is always was, always will be, to recognize that the First Nations people have occupied and cared for the Australian continent for over 65,000 years. Such a long time ago. Before we proceed, let me remind everyone that you are welcome to start posting your questions on the Zoom chat room, and I'm sure the speakers will be pleased to answer them in the questions and answers session. Don't forget about the giveaway for the best questioner. So make sure you raise a good question to win the prize. Now, moving right along, we are going to hear some presentations and research findings related to our theme, Makassar and Yolŋu links. I may ask all speakers to be punctual, please. Thank you in advance. For the first presentation, it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Professor Lynette Russell AM. Professor Russell holds Australian Research Council's Kathleen Fitzpatrick Laureate Fellowship at Monash University, Melbourne. She is an award-winning historian and has published in the areas of post-colonial theory, Aboriginal history and archaeology, and representations of race. Much of her work is focused on cross-cultural engagements and Indigenous agency. Her new multilingual and interdisciplinary project is Global Encounters and First Nations Peoples, 1,000 Years of Australian History. Today, Professor Russell will present A Connected by Sea, Australia and Our Visitors from the East, a 70,000-year adventure. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome Professor Lynette Russell.
Thank you very much. I'll just share my screen. Sorry, I don't think I'm, okay, I think you've probably got it now. Could someone give me a thumbs up that they can see the slide that says always was, always will be? Thank you very much. Thank you so much for the invitation to speak to you tonight. Well, I guess it's your afternoon. It's the late evening here in Melbourne. As ever, I begin by acknowledging that we meet, and of course, I'm currently meeting with you through this virtual reality experience of Zoom on the unceded lands of Naarm. Naarm is the traditional name for Melbourne, where I live, where I work, where I write, and the traditional owners of Naarm are the Kulin nations, the Wurundjeri and Bunurong people. So I always think that it's important that we don't just quickly pass over with an important thing like a acknowledgement of country, but rather we acknowledge very deeply that every footfall we take, every breath we take, every time we look out the window, we're looking onto the unceded lands of the Kulin nation. I'm very grateful to be able to talk to you today about our fairly new and not quite yet established project on global encounters. I'm very grateful to the Consulate for asking us to speak in this NAIDOC week, albeit very, very delayed. I'm sure Bronwyn may have actually touched on this, but my Bahasa is essentially non-existent, so I may be repeating some of what she said. But NAIDOC, the National Aboriginal and Islander Day of Commemoration, is in fact a week. Traces its source back to the 1930s, where a number of people decided to have a period of mourning, a mourning period for what they had lost. They called it the annual day of mourning. It was held on the Sunday before Australia Day, and it was called Aboriginal Day. Over the years, that has shifted, and today we have NAIDOC. It's a week-long celebration of all the things that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have achieved, and the acronym now really stands for a festival that we all really enjoy. I'm usually exhausted at the end of it because there's so many activities and so many wonderful things for us all to partake in. This year's theme, Always Was, Always Will Be, is incredibly important to me. I originally trained as an archaeologist, and I've got a great interest in the deep past of Australia's Aboriginal history. The Mudgebibi, the site that most people were referring to when they talk about 65,000 years, is often used to demonstrate that Aboriginal people have been in the continent for at least 70,000 years. But for many of us, the term is always was, always will be. That occupation might as well be forever, in my opinion. 65,000 years is a very, very long time. But for many Aboriginal people, that concept is meaningless. And in fact, they've been here from time immemorial. Over that great time depth, over that extraordinary length of time of 65,000 years, Aboriginal people settled and Torres Strait Islanders settled in all parts of the country. Sorry, I'm having trouble changing slides for some strange reason. I hope you can see that slide. Over that period, a huge diversity of language groups and cultural groups developed. Over 260 different languages and more than 600 different groups. You'll notice that in this map here, which comes from the Australian Institute of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders Studies in Canberra, the map here doesn't have fixed borders. They're really quite porous. They don't have a hard black line around them, and that's because the borders and the boundaries between communities were flexible. People were able to move across these borders and boundaries often as they needed to. My own family comes from down in the bottom of the southeast of Australia. You'll see a olive green coloured, rather large area in southeast of the mainland, and that's the area that the Watchabaluk people lived, and that's where my own ancestors come from. Australia has always been an island. It's never been connected to the mainland or even island Southeast Asia. I've been very deeply influenced by the work of archaeologists, and in particular Ian McNiven, who's done a lot of work on saltwater people and their spiritual and ritual engagements with the sea. When we look at this map here, and that's actually a map of Sahul, the outlines you will see are the coast of Australia as it is today, the coast of island Southeast Asia, and of course the coast of Papua New Guinea. But it's also, if you look beyond that, you'll see the landmass of Sahul. Sahul is the combination of Australia, New Guinea, and the island of Tasmania, and various other islands as well, of course, including the Torres Strait Islands. In order to get to Australia, even 65,000, 70,000 years ago, people had to deliberately construct boats, seaworthy boats, and set sail. Much of my work over the last 3 decades has really been dedicated to look at Aboriginal agency and to decenter and undermine the importance of Europe in our history. We land people tend to see the ocean as a vast barrier, but of course for sea people, it's almost certainly a highway or a bridge. When we contemplate travel across those vast oceans, I try and align my thinking to the ways in which sailors themselves would see the ocean and their travels across it. What interests me is, what did they sail in? What did they take on board? What animals, what food, what plants, what water? How did they store their water? Did they take trade goods? Were these family groups? And importantly, did they sail only in one direction, or did they return to their homelands with stories of strange new worlds, new animals, and so on? Did their stories encourage others to set sail? And although it may have been 65,000 years plus ago, these are still questions that I think are worthwhile asking. And I think they're questions that shape our understandings of Australia's relationship with our neighbours, both to the east and frankly to the west. If there's one thing people tend to think about when they talk about Australian history, and any Australian who's ever travelled to Europe will guarantee this, and that is that you get told that we were a convict settlement discovered by the English in the 18th century, the British. Cut off from the rest of humanity, Australia's Aboriginal population are determined to be primitive. And of course, the dream time is a term that is applied as though it can somehow take into account perhaps 60 millennia of occupation. There's so much that is wrong with this view of Aboriginal Australia. Maybe somebody, if everyone wouldn't mind muting their, sorry, it's very distracting. Thank you very much. Okay. Of course, that kind of view denies the variation that I talked about just a moment ago, language variation, cultural variation, and of course the different tribal groups across the country. But it also, I think, rather dangerously tends to homogenise Aboriginal communities, Aboriginal people, and Aboriginal history. And when I say homogenise it, it makes it all the same. There was a very famous saying that was coined in the 1920s, an unchanging people in an unchanging land. Well, the one thing we do know about Australia's land and landscape is it was anything but unchanging. It's gone through ice ages and periods of great drought and periods of much wetter periods. And what's more, the people themselves were never unchanging. The people across Australia, Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islanders, have adapted. They've changed and they've manipulated their own environment. They've never been isolated in the way that they were described. This new project that, it's not clicking over, sorry. This new project, and that's the logo for it, Global Encounters and First Nations People, 1,000 Years of Australian History. It's a very ambitious title to throw in 1,000 years. But one of the reasons we've put that in is not because we think that we're going to find contact from Southeast Asia or anywhere else at that period of time, but we are starting to see Pacific connections. And most recently, I've been aware of some material turning up in northern Queensland, which looks like it might indicate connections with people from the Pacific, potentially even as far across as New Zealand and up into Vanuatu, New Caledonia. So 1,000 years of history is what we're looking for. The known European exploration of Australia, and I use that word known in bold, the known European exploration of Australia began in February 1606, when The Dutch with Willem Janszoon landed on the Cape York Peninsula. In October of that very same year, the Spanish explorer Luis de Torres sailed through what he described and became known as the Torres Strait. The project that we're looking at is it uses these significant chronological markers as really just as milestones. It's not going to be a focus entirely on these individual European ships or these individual European explorations, but rather we want to look at and consider the entire paradigm of exploration at this point. So one of the things we're keen to look at and to think about is the role that Terra Australis, the continent of Australia, has played in the imaginary, in the ancient imaginary, and right up until its more recent iteration with the British. You'll see here I've put in some maps because quite a significant number of early maps of the world leave Australia out. There was the rumoured Great Southern Continent, whether that be Australia or indeed going down into Antarctica, but the concept of Terra Australis is what we're really very interested in. The next part, that's one of the aspects of the project, very significant aspect we'll be looking at, thinking about the role that Australia has played in the European imagination. We're also having what we're calling a inside looking out stream. That's the stream of the program, the project, that looks at Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders' perceptions and reactions to newcomers who have come from the sea. We're going to be doing this through exploring First Nations textual records for encounters with outsiders, and also looking at Indigenous knowledges and traditions from Australia, Tasmania and Torres Straits, particularly associated with people arriving from the sea. These might be in the form of songs, they might be in the form of songlines, they might be in the form of stories, they may be in the form of language or even art. One of the other aspects of what we're looking at is what we're calling an outside looking in stream. And that's really where we're looking at the records of Australia from the European encounters perspectives. Those agents of European empires, Northern and Southeast Asian as well, because we're looking at the Macassans. So we're really focusing on the Dutch, the French, the Spanish, probably not any Portuguese, but we will be looking nonetheless. And of course, we'll be viewing this alongside the Macassans and the Chinese maritime networks. Our project is a multidisciplinary and multilingual project. It's very rare in Australia to have a multilingual project. And it's actually quite fascinating to me just how much this has been quite a challenge for people. I am incredibly fortunate in that I have a multilingual team, and I have Ibu Lily, who you will be meeting shortly, and I have Leonie Stevens, who's one of our postdoctoral fellows, and Dr. Lee Penman, who's another postdoctoral fellow. And then I've got a whole wonderful group of people who are supporting me. Global Encounters is leading an international effort in this intellectual space of encounter. We're using traditional and non-traditional archives in reconstructing the context and the complexity of encounters from the sea with our First Nations people. Some of our non-traditional archives include oral traditions, as I just said, including song, rock art, linguistic evidence, including loanwords, botanical evidence. One of the really exciting things at the moment is we have a botanist who's pulling together evidence for all Southeast Asian and introduced plants right across Northern Australia and across into Torres Strait. We're looking at archaeological evidence, disease and genetic evidence, and of course, and not least, but of course, European archival records, which of course is rich in its potential for covering at least the last 400 years. Sorry. One of the things we're planning on doing is creating a massive cultural gateway, which will be an interactive database where each encounter that we uncover is translated, recorded, and placed into a separate field. The idea being that with the over 150 coastal nations in Australia, with their diverse languages, cultures, social organisations, trade networks and economies, as well as their histories and varied topographies, their food resources and environmental riches, we will be able to include all of this into our database. And hopefully this will be one of the really great lasting legacies of our project. Now, of course, you're probably all most interested in the Makassan work. Of course, I'm absolutely delighted and honoured to see that Professor Campbell McKnight is here today. Campbell has set the scene. He recently gave a seminar for us and he said something that has really stuck in my mind, and that was people can't possibly keep saying that they didn't know about the Makassans, and I couldn't agree more. But people still know relatively little about the Makassans. The Makassans came to Australia in search of trepang when, oh no, I've got to change the slide. Thank you. They came from Makassar in Sulawesi, stopping in Timor-Leste, Ambon, and then on their way to Northern Australia and probably into the South Papuan areas as well. Trepang by 1800 was an extremely exotic and very, very valuable commodity. The voyage to Makassar, from Makassar rather, to what they called Maragay or Australia, Northern Australia, probably Yolŋu Land, took about 10 days, and it was facilitated by the northwest monsoon. They sailed east for about 1,000 miles, and then south for about 1,000 miles or 1,500 kilometres, navigating through landfall and oral tradition. The Makassans learned that they particularly liked Arnhem Land. The Yolŋu people are extremely entrepreneurial, and they engaged with the Makassans over many generations and over many centuries. And this included opportunities for Yolŋu people to travel to Makassar, and we have evidence for Yolŋu people, Aboriginal people, visiting Makassar, as well as Makassan people visiting Australia. There are long-term relationships, and indeed families arose from these Makassan relationships. Makassan men fathered children by Aboriginal women, and indeed there was one famous family that had 10 children by 3 different mothers, and in fact one of the Yolŋu women went to Makassar to stay with her father in the early part of the 20th century. The Makassans traded, and they exchanged hooks, knives, cloth, tobacco, food, sometimes even alcohol. The Yolŋu travelled, and the evidence that we have for that is both oral tradition and historical records. In terms of our evidence for the Makassan, we have the Makassans in Australia, we have archaeological evidence, material culture evidence, coins and knives, we have tamarind trees, tobacco, bamboo pipes, borrow words, and even, as I said before, some diseases. The one thing we don't know with any certainty, though I think Campbell has pretty close to nailed it, and that is when all of this began. We know that certainly by the 19th century, the Makassan voyaging and the Makassan trade was fully fledged and very well established. It may have started much earlier than that, and certainly Annie Clark on some of her work has suggested that she has evidence for Chinese ceramics which may be related to trade with Indonesia to about 900 years ago. Ian McNiven has very solidly dated Chinese ceramics in Torres Strait of about 700 or 800 years ago. But none of these things are conclusively about Makassans or Makassan trade, or indeed trepang. It's all very tantalising, I have to say. We've got a lot of evidence and nothing yet that's completely concrete. We're building on the amazing work that's been done by, as I said, Campbell McKnight, but also the work, more recent work of people like Annie Clark, Darryl Wesley, and a whole range of people, particularly archaeologists, Alistair Patterson, who are working on archaeological sites where they have Makassan materials. This is often smoke pits, preserving pits, and storage pits for the trepang. What we're trying to do with global encounters is open up the history of Australia to, as I said at the beginning, decenter the predominance of the European perspective. For too long, Australia's been represented as though we were sitting here for 65,000 years waiting for Captain Cook to arrive. In this, the 250th year of Captain Cook's arrival, it's never been a better time for us to stand back and say, we have a much more complex history than that. We are an island continent, but we've never been isolated. There's always been some opportunities for people to visit. Now, we've got lots of evidence, and over the next 5 years, we hope that we will synthesize it. And one of the great legacies will be that big database that I was talking to you about before, that opportunity for people to tap in, read what we've got, but also add to it. And we really do hope that Aboriginal communities across Australia will add to our database once we get it going, tell their stories, because this is a shared history, a shared story. And it's a story that we're all incredibly excited and proud to start on. So of all the weeks to talk about this, always was, always will be, is the perfect logo, perfect slogan for what we're doing. This is a story of Australia. This is a story about Aboriginal ingenuity. It's about Aboriginal agency. It's about Aboriginal and Indigenous people making contact and controlling trade. It's also about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, always was, always will be, in their own country. So I'm really happy to take questions if anybody would like to. I think I've left about 5 minutes for questions. I shall stop screen sharing. Oh. Oh, we've got a couple in the chat, is that right? Okay. Oh, that's right.
Thank you. What an excellent presentation from Professor Lynette Russell about the historical links between our two countries, which connected by sea. Also, we wish you a good luck for your massive culture getaway database project. We look forward to see it in the future. Before we proceed, grateful for all participants who have not completed the registration form, please do so. The link is available on the chat room. Also, grateful for all participants to mute their audio. Without further ado, I'm excited to introduce you to Lily Yulianti Farid, PhD, a postdoctoral research fellow at Monash Indigenous Studies Centre, and Fikri Yathir, an in-country research assistant, also from Monash Indigenous Studies Centre, to present their research findings about Aboriginal people in Makassar from the Trepang trade period to present time. Please join me to give a warm welcome to Lily Yulianti Farid, PhD, and Fikri Yathir.
Hi, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Good afternoon. First, I would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land where I'm speaking now. And our today's presentation is a part of our ongoing research, as Lynette already explained. And I'm focusing on the Makassar and Southeast Asia context with the Indigenous people in Australia for the Laureate Global Encounters project. Just a bit about myself. So I need to confess that I live in two worlds, so academic world and community world. So during my research with our in-country research assistant, Fikri, whenever we discuss about this, the newspaper archives as one of the first stage of our research, we always feel that we need to share this with our Makassan fellows, because there are so many things that we need to share with them. And before I start, I would like to ask the assistant from the team to present the presentation, the slide presentation. Okay. So yes, this is just a very early stage of our research on our local archives in Makassar, and also the museum visits done by our in-country researcher Fikri Yathir. But as I said before, that it's very important to share what we've got so far to public in Makassar and in Australia. All right, so next slide, please. If Lynette presented maps, I would like to present this artwork. This is a painting entitled String Pulled Across Time, A Journey Continues. It's painted in 2009 by Chinese artist Xiao Xiaoping as a part of Chinese and Makassan trade with Aboriginal Australia, featuring the late respected Indigenous artist John Bulun Bulun and classically trained Chinese artist Xiao Xiaoping, exhibited in Melbourne in 2011. Before I continue, could you please just mute the participants' mic? Thank you. Thank you for your cooperation. So I present this painting to put this presentation in a context that there were three key players in this ancient shared history. So we've got the Aboriginal Australia and Makassan trepangers and Chinese merchants. And the trepang truth is clearly presented in this artwork. So Makassar, from Makassar to Marege, back to Makassar, and in Makassar, the Chinese merchants did the trade with the Makassan traders and then brought the trepang back to China. Fikri, our in-country research assistant, and I are now working on newspapers archives. And despite the lockdown and the restrictions, we managed to have a special visits to two museums in Makassar. Thanks, Fikri, for that. And in this historical relationship, Aboriginal Australia not only met and worked with Makassans, but they also live and sometimes travel with them. As Australian archaeologist John Mulvaney explains, that Aboriginal people voluntarily travel to Southeast Asia on Makassan prau. Those people who eventually returned from Indonesia must have brought an intellectual baggage of enriching cultural influences and exotic tales. Of course, there are so many questions around the visits. For example, when might Aboriginal voyages to Makassar have commenced? What were the key factors behind their visits? What were the main activities in Makassar? And today, we just want to focus on what resources are available for general public in Makassar to learn about the visits and context. So today we present the stories of past visits and also recent visits in connection with the contemporary Australia-Indonesia relationship. Fikri will later talk about the newspaper archives following stories of Peter Spilett's research and initiative to reconstruct Makassan Prau Hati Marege, because in the 1980s, one of the leading newspaper in Eastern Indonesia, Pedoman Rakyat, provided such a large coverage for this initiative. Okay, next. Next slide, please. Okay, let me just share a bit about the evidence. Here's the series of portraits of Orang Marege, a group of Aboriginal people in Makassar in the 19th century. These pictures were taken in Makassar in 1873 by an Italian ethnologist named Odoardo Beccari. Beccari noted that Australians were a common sight in the streets of the town at about this time, and secured the cooperation of 5 of them, a man and 4 little boys who hailed from the Cobber Peninsula. They seems to be as much as part of 19th century Makassar as anybody else. Don't you think so? And of course, we need to quote Bapak Campbell McKnight from her seminal works, The Voyage to Marege here. One of the evidence says that a Dutch administrator who visited Sulawesi in 1824 seems to have been the first to note the presence of Australians there. Very black, tall in stature, with curly hair, not frizzy like that of the Papuan peoples. Long legs, thick lips, and in general are quite well built. And half a century later, or in 1876, there were said to be 17 Aboriginal people in Makassar. So this is the pictures of the group of Indigenous Australia from Cobber Peninsula. And if you look at the another artwork, this is also a collection from Buku-Larrŋgay Mulka Art Centre. This artwork actually inspired by family story. I quote this from Peter Stevenson book. Sometimes in the late 19th century, an Aboriginal man named Damalacha visited Makassar. Upon his return, he relayed the story of having seen Makassan women making clothes by inserting 2 sticks of bamboo into the ground and stringing cotton thread between them. The story of Damalacha later inspired his son, an Aboriginal artist, Munggarawi Yunupingu, to draw this famous artwork entitled Malay Women Weaving in 1946. So of course, there have been considerable stories, memories, and documentary evidence for the extent of Aboriginal people voyaging to Indonesia and other parts of Southeast Asia. And these stories suggest that they were explorers. They were full of curiosities, just like everyone else. And as historian Mike Des clearly puts it, when we listen to a story about an Aboriginal man visiting Makassar, it is not the account of a man born into a society so isolated that he could never adapt or learn from other people. It explains a good deal about the motivations of the Aboriginal Australian voyagers. Das, in this context, refers to the story of Charlie Jalajari, who came to Makassar in the late 19th century. Charlie gave his story to Ronald and Catherine Byrne, 2 anthropologists who did extensive work in Arnhem Land during the 1940s and 1950s. Let me stop here, and Fikri will continue on the connections between Aboriginal and Makassan people in a contemporary context. Hand over to you, Fikri.
All right. First of
Hi,
all,
Fikri.
thank you, everyone.
Hi, Fikri.
Hi, Siena.
Before you
Hey,
go on,
everyone.
Yep.
I'd just like to say, Munggarawi Yunupingu is my great-grandfather.
Wow, yes, that's
It's
why I'm thinking
so amazing,
from your
you know?
family lives.
Really
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Siena.
This is
Thank you, Siena,
so
for
close
that.
to home.
Very close to your heart and home, of course. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming to our presentation today, and thank you for having me. And thank you, Khalili, for the beautiful introduction. Now, I'm going to present to you one of the interesting findings from our ongoing research so far that we've been doing since July this year. Take a look at this. The slide, please. Next slide, please.
No, the previous slide, the pedoman rakyat. Yes, thank you.
Yes, please. All right, cool. Now, take a look at this. If you were born and lived in the 80s, you must know and still remember this newspaper, Pedoman Rakyat, which is arguably the leading newspaper in Makassar in that era. This piece of article was taken from Pedoman Rakyat, published on the 1st of July 1986. It featured about the visit from 10 Aboriginal students of Bachelor College in Northern Territory, Australia. They flew all the way from their land to our land on their quest for finding their distant Makassan relatives. This was also a milestone of Australian Makassan encounter, as this was the first time ever they met again after the last Teripang or Trepang sailed by their Makassan ancestors in 1907, which was the year of the restriction to fish on Australian waters officially took place by Australian government. Actually, there have been talks that there were still visits from the Makassan to Arnhem Land after 1907, but there was no quiet publication on any of those. So the meeting between these students and their Makassan relatives in 1986, which is 79 years after 1907, was monumental. It received considerable media coverage, and Pedoman Rakyat actually gave quite a big space on their page, which also showed their attention and interest to the piece of history from the past that was happening again in 1986. Another thing that's also very interesting from this visit, they were surprised when they saw lontara trees and tamarind trees. Tamarind is pohon asam, because they never thought they would find them outside Arnhem Land. Researchers discovered that those trees were actually planted firstly by Makassan trepangers in the past. Yolŋu people knew these plantations from Makassan people. One of the students from the visit was Lak-Lak. And on the next slide, Kak Lily again Lak-Lak's impression on the visit and her experience expressed in her memoir. Please, Kak Lily.
Okay, thank you, Fikri. So everyone, we try to find different archives, records for these historical visits. And you found this from this book, Welcome to My Country, written by Lak-Lak Buddharwanga and family. This is also a Siena Stubbs family, big family in Yirrkala. So if Fikri already explained about how the media, the local media in Makassar framed the visits and the reunion, the family reunion, this is Lak-Lak's memoir on the 1986 visit. I heard a story about how one of my family's great-grandmothers had been taken from Arnhem Bay to Sulawesi when she was young. This lady, Garner, went to Makassar with the trepangers. She grew up there, married a Makassan, had children. While I was studying at Bachelor is a college for Indigenous people outside Darwin, I started thinking of that woman. And when Lak-Lak and the students visited Makassar in 1986, she continues the memoir by saying, when we met the Makassan family, they treated me like a princess because my husband's name, Bachang. It means prince. Bachang is a common name both in Makassar and in Yirrkala. So people were touching me because I was Black, asking me lots of questions. They thought I was from Africa. And they asked for Bob Marley. But I said I was from Arnhem Land, from Marege. That's Yolŋu. And they were crying for me that I didn't know them. Next slide.
Next slide.
Yes.
All right, now let's talk about the background story. Why the visit ever happened in the first place? So once upon a time, in June 1985, Peter Spilett, a historian from Australia, had a discussion with a Makassan woman named Sari Banong, and she asked relatives in Arnhem Land before his flying back to Australia to write his report about his research on the particular history of Aboriginal Australians and Makassans. Peter Spilett talked about Sari Banong's request in his 6th series of essays published by Pedoman Rakyat 6 days in a row, starting November 5th until 10th, 1986, and translated by Makassan historian from Hasanuddin University, Nurdin Yathir. So Peter Spilett went back and had a meeting with some newspaper staff there, and they announced it, which led to many people reading the announcement, including bachelor college students. So they were so excited to fly to Makassar to meet Sari Banong and their other Makassan relatives. And they organized this travel with big help from Michael Cook, their lecturer, coordinating with Peter Spilett. And then they finally made it happen and arrived in Makassar June the 30th, 1986. They finally met with Hussein dan Rangka's family in their house in Jalan Ontalama. I will tell you a bit more about Hussein dan Rangka on the next slide. Next slide. Slide, the family tree.
The previous one, the family tree. Thank you.
The family tree slide.
Yeah. That's it.
All right. So yeah. So as you can see on your screen, this is actually pretty straightforward. As we can see here, that Hussein dan Rangka married to Makassan wife and also Marege wife. And Sari Banong's relation to Lak-Lak is somewhere along these lines, but the thing is, great-great-great-grandfather Hussein Dengrangka. This family tree was simplified because we just drew it based upon Petrus Pila's essays on Pedoman Rakyat. This historical visit has opened many doors to reconnect with Makassar. Next slide, please. All right, so I've got 1 minute left. So in the next two slides, I'm just going to get us through briefly on the timeline of Aboriginal Australians' visits on the 20th and 21st century. July 1986, 10 students from Bachelor College meeting with Hussein Dengrangka and Sari Banong's family, as I've presented before. In December 1987, there was Steve Hatton. He was Prime Minister of Northern Territory, along with Stanley Tipulora, a legislative representative from Northern Territory, to launch Hati Marege Padewakang Perahu or PRAU. In 1997, 16 Yolŋu cultural practitioners for trepang performance at the Kingdom of Goa or Balak Lompoa. July 2015, we've got Ronald Nawurapu Wunungmura. He was an artist for NAIDOC Week invited by Australian MC.
Next slide, please.
July 2016, we got Larry Brandy. He was a storyteller with Wismakla for Australia Storytelling Day. July 2017, there was Buyung exhibition at Museum Kota as part of NAIDOC Week 2017. December 2018, 3 for Makassar Yirrkala Artist Exchange Program. They were here to attend a seminar at Unhas and some visits to Rotterdam, Balak Lompoa, and Artspace in Takalar. And a year after, in June until July 2019, they're back to Makassar, still part of the Makassar Yirrkala Artist Exchange Program, but this time they were here for the art exhibition at Rumata Artspace. So that's all that we've been collecting so far of the visit from Aboriginal Australians in Makassar after 1907. We are still digging into archival grounds to find more visits, information, as well as data about the encounters and interactions between Aboriginal Australians and Makassarians. Next slide. Last but not least, Kak Lily is going to conclude this presentation and what we've been learning personally as Makassans and also professionally as researchers. Please, Kak Lily.
Yes, unfortunately, we've got problem with the slide presentations, but the last slide was the conclusion page. I'm just gonna quickly go through it because this is just a very early stage of our museum visits and newspaper archives. So yes, I stop here, and of course, as Lynette says, that we're looking forward to share the database, and then we definitely will work with such an incredible team, multilingual team, and then this is actually one of the legacy that we really want to work, looking forward to work together. And of course, as I said before, because I live in two worlds, I work with academic world and then a community work, whatever, I feel that I need to share something, especially for my college and my friends in Makassar and Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you very much for such interesting research findings, Lily and Fikri. Wow, I have learned so much from the presentation from the Laureate Global Encounters team. Thank you very much. Isn't it amazing to know about Australia-Indonesia very close relations since 1,000 years ago? Well, again, let me remind everyone, if you have any questions, please do post it on the Zoom chat room so your chance to get the giveaway is bigger. Moving to the next agenda, I would like to invite Andi Buyung Saputra, the head of Council of South Sulawesi Indigenous Peoples Alliance, and also a community leader of Kajang tribe. Andi Buyung is actively advocating and fighting the rights of the local communities to be acknowledged by the government so they can achieve sovereignty, independency, and stay as the owner of their own land. Andi Buyung will talk about Kajang tribe, an indigenous community in South Sulawesi. Does anyone know where this tribe lives? It's in Bulukumba, southern tip of Makassar. Please, ladies and gentlemen, join me to welcome Andi Buyung Saputra.
Terima kasih. Saya ingin presentasi dengan menggunakan bahasa Indonesia, mohon maaf. Mungkin ada penerjemah yang disiapkan, jadi saya akan membacakan agar semua bisa memahami presentasi yang akan saya sampaikan pada sore ini.
The presenter will be delivered the presentation in Bahasa Indonesia.
Okay. Pertama-tama saya ucapkan terima kasih dan penghargaan yang setinggi-tingginya telah mengundang kami, Aman Sulawesi Selatan, untuk berpartisipasi dalam acara yang luar biasa ini.
Thank you for inviting the Aman as to join this event.
Acara ini tentu saja kami harapkan tidak berhenti di sini saja, akan tetapi berlanjut terus demi kemaslahatan dan kelangsungan perjuangan oleh masyarakat adat, khususnya yang ada di Indonesia dan juga yang ada di Australia tentunya.
It is hopefully that this event will not stop from here, but it will be continued as a part of the indigenous community, especially in Indonesia.
Ya, bisa dilihat slide-nya mungkin? Kelihatan?
Yes.
Yeah, slide is clear.
Clear?
Ya.
Ya, kelihatan Mbak ya?
Ya, kelihatan.
Kelihatan jelas.
Oke, terima kasih. Saya memulai bahwa saya merupakan salah satu pemangku adat di wilayah adat Amatoa Kajang, sekaligus juga sebagai Ketua Dewan Aman Sulawesi Selatan.
The presenter is the member of Indigenous People Alliance of in Indonesia, and also the leader of Amatoa Kajang in Bulukumba, South Sulawesi.
Ya, pertama-tama saya ingin memperkenalkan bahwa Aman merupakan sebuah organisasi yang sangat konsen dalam memperjuangkan masyarakat adat yang ada di Indonesia, khususnya kami ada di Sulawesi Selatan itu beberapa sudah advokasi dan mendapatkan pengakuan dari pemerintah.
Aman is a community, especially to fight for the indigenous people based in Bulukumba, South Sulawesi, and it has been legalized by the Indonesian government of Indonesian government.
Ini adalah peta sebaran anggota Aman di Indonesia. Anggota Aman itu terdiri dari 2.359 komunitas di seluruh Indonesia yang berjumlah sekitar 17 juta anggota pribadi.
This is the map of distribution of Aman member communities, Indigenous People Alliance of the Archipelago. The member of the community is 2,359, and with the total member which spread in the whole Indonesia 17 million members.
Ada beberapa hal yang menjadikan masyarakat adat itu perlu untuk dilindungi, sebab mereka harus menjadi tuan rumah di negeri mereka.
There are some things that the indigenous community have legacy, that they have the right to live in Indonesia and to be as a host in their own homeland.
Iya, masyarakat adat tentunya pemilik daripada tanah mereka sendiri yang selama ini banyak dieksploitasi oleh pihak luar tanpa izin mereka.
Indigenous people are the one who belong to their own homeland, but unfortunately, the fact shows that there are so many exploitation activity that have been exploited their own homeland.
Oleh karena itu, Aman sangat konsen dalam memperjuangkan hak-hak mereka sehingga pemerintah dan juga masyarakat adat dapat berjalan seiring sejalan dalam melaksanakan pembangunan di wilayah adat mereka.
That's why Aman in his Aman community fight for this indigenous community and can work hand in hand with the government. Work hand in hand with the government.
Oke. Kemudian sebelum kita masuk ke pembahasan Kajang sebagai salah satu anggota Aman dan wilayah adat, kami ingin memperkenalkan bahwa Kajang merupakan satu wilayah subsuku dari Makassar.
Before we explore deeply, elaborate deeply about the Kajang tribes, we would like to introduce you Kajang tribes. It is one of the community in South Sulawesi, which is located in Bulukumba Regency.
Kajang merupakan satu wilayah di Kabupaten Bulukumba yang sampai saat ini mempertahankan adat istiadat, wilayah adat mereka, bahkan kebiasaan-kebiasaan yang bisa dilihat dari dulu sampai sekarang itu tetap lestari.
Kajang is the place or area which is still maintaining their own culture and that they still keep maintaining their own culture, and also the community have not been differentiated by the other people.
Oke. Masyarakat adat Kajang memiliki prinsip, yaitu pasang rikajang. Inilah yang mengatur segala sendi-sendi kehidupan masyarakat adat Kajang, baik itu dalam bergaul, bertindak, maupun dalam kehidupan mereka sehari-hari yang dikenal dengan pasang rikajang.
Kajang community have their own rules or regulation in having relation with the other people, in having attitude that they keep on doing it in their own daily life.
Ya, pasang rikajang ini tidak tertulis, tetapi wajib untuk dihafalkan dan dimengerti oleh seluruh masyarakat adat.
Pasang rikajang this is the regulation, namely pasang rikajang. It is not written, but it must be understandable by all the people in Kajang.
Menariknya di masyarakat adat Kajang karena hampir 60% pasang rikajang itu mengatur tentang harmonisasi antara manusia dengan alam semesta.
It is interesting that 16% of the regulation, it is a rule to harmonize the relation among the human and also the nature.
Bagi mereka, melukai alam atau mengeksploitasi alam yang tanpa tujuan itu akan merusak semua sendi kehidupan mereka.
For the Kajang people, exploiting the nature means that they can destroy any kind of life, daily life they have own.
Pasang rikajang juga mengatur bahwa hidup kita harus dilaksanakan secara sederhana dan sesuai dengan kebutuhan saja, bukan keinginan yang besar.
Pasang Rikajang also ruled that we have to live in simplicity and we live based on what we need, not on what we want.
Ini adalah gambaran umum tentang masyarakat wilayah masyarakat adat Kajang yang ada di Kabupaten Bulukumba di antara seluruh.
These are the area of the Kajang community in Bulukumba.
Ya, di bagian merah inilah wilayah adat Amatoa Kajang yang mendiami bagian selatan Pulau Sulawesi Selatan.
The red sign, it is the area of the Kajang people and also custom area which is in the southern part of Sulawesi.
Ya. Seperti yang disampaikan tadi bahwa Pasang Rikajang ini yang mengatur segala sendi kehidupan masyarakat adat, dan tentunya ini menjadi aturan yang tidak tertulis, bahkan terdapat sanksi-sanksi yang di dalamnya apabila hal tersebut dilanggar.
Pasang Rikajang, it is unwritten law, but there's still a sanction or punishment if they disobey this regulation or the rule itself.
Daerah wilayah adat Amatoa Kajang itu terdiri dari dua.
Amatoa Kajang there are two areas in Amatoa Kajang.
Ada satu yang dinamakan daerah Kajang Dalam dan satu yang dinamakan Kajang Luar.
This area consists of two. The first one is called Kajang Dalam or inside Kajang, and the second one is Kajang Luar or outside Kajang.
Di Kajang Dalam itu seluruh Pasang Rikajang dilaksanakan secara utuh dan tidak terkecuali. Namun di luar daripada Kajang Dalam, Kajang Luar itu sedikit fleksibel dalam melaksanakan aturan-aturan yang ada di Pasang Rikajang.
In Kajang Dalam, all the regulation of Pasang Rikajang it is applied for the whole without any perception. But in outside Kajang, it is much more flexible that Pasang Rikajang cannot be applied for all the people in Kajang Luar or outside Kajang.
Ya, di peta ini yang garis hitam adalah wilayah adat Kajang Luar. Sedangkan yang warna kuning inilah wilayah adat Kajang Dalam yang melaksanakan Pasang Rikajang secara utuh.
On the map you can see that Pasang Rikajang, Kajang Luar, it is the black line, but in Kajang Dalam, it is the yellow one, which is all the Pasang Rikajang. It is applied for all the people inside Kajang Dalam.
Ya. Pengaturan kepemilikan tanah yang ada di wilayah adat Amatoa seperti yang tertulis di slide tersebut.
The regulation it is applied for the belonging of the land itself.
Ya, jadi di sana pemangku adat terdiri dari 36 pemangku adat, semuanya memiliki tanah galarang.
All the custom leader in there, they have their own title for their own land.
Ya. Masing-masing pemangku adat ini memiliki tugas dan untuk melaksanakan pemerintahan adat yang ada di wilayah Amatoa Kajang.
The custom leader has their own role to govern the people in Kajang land.
Ya. Di sini ada 3 bentuk kepemilikan tanah. Yang pertama adalah kepemilikan secara komunal, kemudian yang kedua adalah kepemilikan secara pribadi, yang ketiga adalah kepemilikan yang dapat dipindahkan kepada orang yang membutuhkan lokasi pertanian untuk ditanami sebagai kebun.
The owner of the land, it consists of three. The first one is communal, the second one is for the private, and the third one is it is replaceable, which is it can be replaced to be used for the farmer, for the farming land.
Kemudian ini adalah beberapa contoh pasang rikajang yang saya sebutkan tadi, bahwa lebih harmonisasi kepada alam karena mereka menganggap bahwa alam beserta isinya itu merupakan sumber kehidupan masyarakat adat Kajang.
This is the example of the pasang rikajang, as have mentioned before, that pasang rikajang has a role to harmonize the relation between the people or human to the nature itself. They believe that the nature is the source of life.
Ketergantungan mereka terhadap hutan adat itu sangat besar karena sumber-sumber kehidupan mereka berasal dari pertanian. Hutan adat inilah yang menyuplai air ke daerah-daerah pertanian untuk mereka kelola.
Their dependency to the forest cannot be changeable because this forest is to supply their needs to the water and also their needs to the nature.
Ya, hutan adat bagi yang mengeksploitasi tanpa seizin pemangku adat itu akan mendapatkan denda yang sangat besar, bahkan dapat diusir dari komunitas wilayah adat Kajang.
The custom forest, the exploitation of custom forest, which has no legalized by the custom leader or the custom people in Kajang can have the sanction or can be out from the land.
Ya. Kemudian ada berbagai macam denda yang akan mereka dapatkan sampai dengan turunan ke-7.
The sanction can be for the 7th generation.
Ya, hal inilah yang menjaga sampai hari ini pun kita bisa melihat kelestarian hutan adat yang ada di wilayah Amatoa Kajang.
By this rule, we can see that the forest can be still being protected in Kajang community.
Di dalam hutan adat tersebut juga dilaksanakan berbagai ritual-ritual adat sehingga betul-betul tingkat ketergantungan masyarakat adat terhadap hutan adat yang mereka miliki itu sangat tinggi.
In the forest, in the custom forest, there are still rituals that the community in there doing. It is to keep the dependency of the people of Kajang to the forest or the nature.
Ya, beberapa contoh yang saya dapat sebutkan tentang kearifan lokal mereka berdamai dengan alam semesta, yaitu pada waktu mereka menebang pohon itu tidak boleh menggunakan gergaji rantai atau peralatan mesin.
For instance, the local wisdom that they do to make peace with the nature is by the cutting of the tree cannot use the electrical seesaw.
Ya. Tapi menggunakan kapak tangan.
But by using the harm.
Ya. Ini tujuannya adalah untuk melambatkan populasi agar tidak terjadi penebangan hutan secara masif walaupun mereka telah mendapatkan izin.
It is to minimize the exploitation itself, even though they have the legalization from the government of the Kajang.
Ya, kemudian daerah mereka juga tidak boleh masuk aliran listrik karena mereka sangat menjaga kehidupan dari hal-hal yang bersifat modern.
They also have no electricity in their homeland because they still keep maintaining their simplicity of the life.
Ya, pada gambar di atas dilihat bahwa sekelompok orang ini telah melakukan penebangan pohon yang mendapatkan izin. Pohon tersebut tidak boleh diseret, namun harus diangkat agar tidak merusak populasi yang ada yang dilewati oleh pohon yang diangkat, yang terseret tersebut.
In the picture, you can see the deforestation doing by the people in Kajang is the tree itself cannot be. It must be brought by some of the people so that it cannot destroy the nature around there.
Ya. Kemudian pada gambar yang selanjutnya di sini, dalam satu dusun hanya boleh memiliki satu sumur.
Another rule in Kajang that they must have one well for one hamlet in there.
Ya, ini tujuannya agar bumi tidak tersakiti di sana. Jadi masyarakat Kajang itu menganggap bahwa bumi adalah ibu mereka, sehingga kemanapun mereka berjalan itu tidak boleh memakai alas kaki sebagai penghargaan atas ibu mereka di tanah mereka sendiri.
The purpose of the purpose of it that they believe that the earth is the mother for them, so that they cannot hurt the earth, because another example is they taken off their footwear so that they cannot hurt or they cannot destroy the earth, because they believe that the earth is their mother.
Ya. Ada beberapa kearifan lokal lain yang terdapat pada masyarakat adat Kajang. Salah satunya adalah sifat kesederhanaan mereka dalam melaksanakan kehidupan mereka sehari-hari.
Another local wisdom that the Kajang community believe that simplicity in life, in doing daily life.
Mereka percaya bahwa kesederhanaan adalah kekayaan yang hakiki.
They believe that simplicity is the real welfare.
Ya, mereka percaya bahwa setelah kehidupan ini dan melaksanakan kehidupan secara sederhana, mereka akan mendapatkan kekayaan nanti di hari kemudian.
They believe that when they do the simple life, they in the afterlife they will get what they have been doing on earth, on the real world.
Pada masa pandemi saat ini, Kajang merupakan satu daerah yang tidak terpengaruh dengan pandemi COVID-19 karena mereka memiliki ketahanan pangan serta kemandirian lokal yang dapat membuat mereka bertahan dalam situasi apapun.
In this pandemic COVID-19, Kajang community it is one of the community that has no influence with the pandemic COVID-19 life, because they have their own struggle, they have their own rule that they cannot be influenced by the pandemic of COVID-19.
Ya. Kajang bahkan tidak percaya dengan di luar sana itu terdapat pandemi COVID-19 karena mereka sampai saat ini pun tidak merasakan sedikit pun akibatnya.
Kajang people do not trust that there is a pandemic COVID-19 outside there, because they don't have any impact on them.
Iya. Berdasarkan hal tersebut, tentunya kita di masyarakat aman, di komunitas aman, mendorong agar kemandirian pangan, kemandirian peternakan, dan juga kemandirian perkebunan mereka dapat dipertahankan agar ekonomi masyarakat adat ini sama seperti yang dirasakan oleh masyarakat adat Kajang.
That's why the Aman community support the Kajang people for their food independency and also for the farmer dependency to support their daily life in there.
Hampir seluruh kebutuhan masyarakat adat Kajang itu ada di lokasi mereka masing-masing.
Almost
Tidak
all
memerlukan, ya.
Almost all the needs of the Kajang people they have in their surround them, in their environment.
Ya, bahkan jika Bapak Ibu sekalian berkunjung ke sana dengan memakai masker, mereka akan merasa tersinggung karena menganggap bahwa daerah mereka ini tidak steril.
Moreover, if you visit the Kajang community in there, they will feel they will feel disturbed because they feel that their area is not sterilized.
Ya. Jadi sampai dengan hari ini masyarakat adat Kajang, Matoa Kajang itu tidak mempercayai bahwa terjadi pandemik yang melanda seluruh dunia.
So until now, that Kajang community do not trust that there is a COVID-19 pandemic outside of the world, outside of their world.
Ya, masyarakat adat Kajang juga sangat percaya bahwa apa yang kita tanam hari ini tentunya akan kita petik di masa yang akan datang. Mereka sangat mempercayai bahwa hukum Tuhan itu betul-betul adalah hukum yang pasti dan kesederhanaan yang mereka lakukan hari ini dan mereka lakukan hari ini itu akan menjadi sebuah jalan yang akan membuat mereka nanti kaya di masa yang akan datang.
Kajang people believe that what you sow is what you reap. They believe that what the God's law is the real one. That what you do in the real world is what you will get in another life after the life in the real world.
Ya, mungkin itu saja yang saya dapat sampaikan. Kita berkembang dalam diskusi sebentar. Terima kasih. Selamat sore.
Well, that's all. Thank you.
Wow, to be honest, I am from Bulukumba, but I don't know that much about suku Kajang. So thank you very much, Pak Andi Buyung, especially on how Kajang indigenous people live in harmony with nature in the time of global pandemic. And also about Pasang Ri Kajang, set up relationship rules between human and nature and between human and human. That was so interesting. Thank you very much, Pak Andi Buyung. Before we start the question and answer, let me encourage everyone again to post your question on Zoom chat to be read on the question and answer session, both during the seminar and virtual talks. And for those who already sent out their questions, thank you very much. Please keep them coming. I will ask the panel the questions in groups to ensure we can answer as many questions as possible within our allocated time. The first question is coming from Awaludin Syamsu at UMI, Universitas Muslim Indonesia. What impact have Makassans had on shaping modern Australia? Professor Russell, perhaps you could start, but other speakers, please jump in if you have something else to add. And our second question is from Sheila at the Australian Consulate-General in Makassar for Dr. Lily Yulianti. But please, again, other speakers also add your thoughts. What role can millennials play in helping to maintain and strengthen the long-standing Makassar-Yolŋu relationship? Okay, let's start with these questions.
I can answer fairly quickly the first one. In terms of influence, there's a whole range of influences, everything from language. We also know that there was the introduction of the Islamic religion, language, religious, culture, artistic, culinary. There's just so many different ways in which these influences are felt. Some of them have a very deep history, some of them not so much. But certainly if you ever get the opportunity to go to Darwin, you will see what an extraordinary cosmopolitan and culturally rich place it is, with lots of Makassan influence, lots of Southeast Asian influence. It's quite a remarkable place. So the influence of Makassans in Australia is quite substantial, but it's still not as well known as, frankly, it should be.
Can I add something to that?
Please, Campbell.
Please, Pak Campbell.
One important, this is really just following up one point, and that is about the presence of Islam in Australia early. These days, there are lots of Muslim immigrants in Australia, and that's wonderful. It helps them to understand that Islam has been in Australia for a long time. It's not just arrived in the last 20 years. And so there's a group in Sydney who want to make the point for young Muslims, especially in Sydney, but in the whole of Australia, about the importance of not thinking that Islam has just arrived in Australia, but it has in fact been here for a long time. I think that's a very important social use, if you like, of the story.
Thank you very much for the additional point, Professor Campbell McKnight. That was one of very important point. Yes, please, Ibu Lily.
For the role of the millennials, I remember after we organized the artist exchange between Makassan and Yolŋu artists. If anyone knows AYA, Australia Indonesia Youth Associations, they've got a chapter in Makassar and Eastern Indonesia. So AYA actually invited Febri, our project officer for this exchange artist exchange program, and they interviewed Febri actually and focusing on this topic. What actually the millennials and young people roles to to maintain this relationship and strengthen people to people connections. So of course we're so happy to look at this kind of like initiative done by AYA. And I remember 2 years ago when I was invited as a mentor for Kaus Indi, another initiative between the Conference of Australia Indonesia, dominated by young professionals and students. They also acknowledge that whenever we talk about Australia-Indonesia relationship, Indigenous Australia and of course, Indigenous issues from Indonesia need to be included, because when we talk about Orang Australia and talk about Orang Indonesia, we don't talk about Orang Australia kulit putih. We don't talk about, when we talk about Australians, we don't focus on the white Australians only, but Australia is such a multicultural, it's a multicultural country. Orang Australia concept, we need to challenge that. And sometimes I feel that in the last 10 years, more and more initiatives, occurring in both sides, that whenever you talk about Australia-Indonesia relationships, Indigenous Australia need to be included, has to be included in these relationships. And this is actually why we started this initiative back in 2018. And every time I develop a program in Makassar and elsewhere in Indonesia, I always ensure that I work with at least 75% of young people, because this is actually during you develop this project, for example, these collaborations, we work with young artists, because it was during the preparations and the project development that you transfer the knowledge, you share what you've got from your academic research, what I found in from books that I've read, or the newspaper archives that we found during our early research in Makassar this year. So first thing that we have always think is from Rumata Artspace and also myself personally is about how to share this with young generations, because this is actually big. I also learned a lot of things. Back in 2018, I did a reflective journal for myself, that how could I miss the Indigenous people connections in during my study in Melbourne, for example. I received scholarship for my master, and then I received another scholarship from my PhD, but there's a very few opportunities for me to work and connected myself with Indigenous Australia. So when Lynette said, would you like to join this? When Helen from AIC said, would you like to start to think about reconnect Makassar and not only Yolŋu people, but with Indigenous Australia, and a concept of a new orang Australia baru itu apa gitu, siapa mereka? Ini yang this is actually why I always like sharing whatever we've got from Rumata Artspace with young organization, organization of youth in both countries. I hope this answers your question, Sheila. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ibu Lily and Professor Lynette Russell. It's covered the main points. Thank you. Let's move on to our next group of questions. Subik from Ceres is asking the team from the Monash Indigenous Studies Center, the Global Encounter Project, has your project included research on the sustainable farming methods discussed in Bruce Pascoe's book, Dark Emu? And our next question is from one of our artists who will we hear from very soon as part of the virtual exhibition, Kak Dania Sitadewi, who asked, could the speakers please tell us more about the Yolŋu youth who partook the voyages with Makassans in order to learn the language and become better trade negotiators upon their return to Australia? Is it possible that they could have sailed to other major ports around Indonesia, ASEAN, or even as far as China? The Buyung people are renowned for being major sailors and maritime traders. So if the Yolŋu youth went with them, could they have also visited many places around the region? Professor Russell, perhaps you could start with the questions.
Certainly. The question about from our colleague at Ceres, no, we're not looking at the sustainable crops and such that Bruce Pascoe has suggested in his book. However, very, very interested in this topic ourselves. All of us are very keen on, having read it and very interested in the topic. So no, I'm afraid we're not looking at sustainable. We have to draw the line somewhere. So that's where we're doing that. And in terms of whether or not people could have sailed further than Southeast Asia, I don't think there's any doubt people could have. What we don't have is evidence. And that's really what we want. That's what we're looking for. Something that we can, tangible evidence. We do have all sorts of strange things. We have odd Chinese coins here and coins from Northern Africa, but we don't quite know what they mean. So it's really important for us to look at them with a rigorous scholarly eye and try and determine if we can actually get to the bottom of how these things arrived here, because too many of these things could have simply, this sort of could have just appeared, someone dropped them, quite recently. But there are some Chinese objects, there are things that we need to think about, and we're doing that.
Oh, thank you very much, Professor Russell. Any speakers would like to add something? All right, thank you very much. Now we are going to go for another group of questions. For Pa Andi Buyung about the Kajang people. Our first question is from Sheila again from the Konjan, who asks what kind of punishment there are for people who disobey the Kajang customs. And then another question from Ulfi Kalista, who has remarked that the culture of suku Kajang is in many ways similar to suku Kanekes tribe, Baduy, and ask whether there is a relation between the two communities. And our third question is from Kak Sita again, who asks whether the way of living of suku Kajang could be an answer for sustainable development. Saya artikan boleh ya Pak ya. Yang pertama, pertanyaan dari Sheila, apa hukuman yang diberikan pada orang-orang yang melanggar hukum adat pasang rikajang. Yang kedua dari Ulfi Kalista, dia melihat ada beberapa kesamaan antara suku Kajang dan suku Kanekes atau Baduy di Banten. Apakah keduanya memiliki relasi, Pak? Dan yang ketiga dari Kasita, apakah cara hidup suku Kajang merupakan salah satu jawaban untuk memiliki kehidupan yang lebih berkelanjutan? Silahkan Pak Buyung.
Ya, terima kasih. Yang terakhir dulu langsung saya jawab. Cara hidup masyarakat suku Kajang, apakah dianggap bahwa itu yang berkelanjutan? Bahwa sebenarnya kan manusia diciptakan untuk bermanfaat bagi orang lain dan alam semesta. Begitu pula lah prinsip dari masyarakat adat Kajang. Kemudian masyarakat adat menganggap bahwa jika kita berharmonisasi dengan alam, maka tentu saja alam juga akan menjaga kita dari keberlangsungan kehidupan yang akan datang. Artinya, masyarakat adat Kajang ini ingin memastikan bahwa kualitas yang dilihat kita pada hari ini itu sama kualitasnya dengan akan dilihat oleh anak cucu kita. Jadi segala bentuk apalagi namanya warisan yang akan diberikan kepada anak cucu itu kualitasnya harus sama persis yang kita lihat hari ini. Tidak ada yang berubah, sehingga bukan hanya dongeng yang disampaikan dan juga bukan hanya cerita yang disampaikan kepada mereka tanpa ada realita yang diperlihatkan secara nyata. Kemudian hukum adat. Hukum adat yang paling tertinggi di sana yang saya sampaikan tadi adalah mereka diusir dari komunitas. Diusirnya ini bukan hanya yang berbuat, akan tetapi turunan-turunan mereka, sehingga ini akan saling menjaga kekerabatan dan kekeluargaan mereka agar tidak melakukan pelanggaran adat, khususnya pelanggaran yang menyangkut persoalan hutan adat. Pelanggaran hutan adat adalah merupakan pelanggaran yang tertinggi di wilayah adat Amatoa Kajang. Tidak ada toleransi untuk para pelanggar yang mengeksploitasi hutan tanpa izin dari pemangku adat. Kemudian yang ketiga, saya balik lagi, pelanggaran ada 3 di sana. Pelanggaran tertinggi, sedang, dan ringan. Tadi pelanggaran berat saya sudah sampaikan hukumannya, itu didenda dengan uang, kalau dirupiahkan itu sekitar 24 juta. Kemudian pelanggaran sedang itu didenda juga melalui sidang adat sebanyak 15 juta. Kemudian yang pelanggaran paling ringan itu biasanya mereka cuma diperingati dengan denda sekitar 6 juta. Uang hasil denda ini itu yang dibagikan kepada seluruh orang yang hadir dalam sidang adat tersebut untuk menyampaikan pesan bahwa sidang adat telah memutuskan yang bersangkutan bersalah dan mengakui kesalahannya, dan ini disampaikan kepada seluruh orang. Kemudian yang saya rangkum juga mungkin semua, Mbak, ya, biar saya tidak lupa. Ya. Untuk jawaban yang terakhir tentang kesamaan masyarakat adat Kajang, Baduy, dan Kanekes, ya kehidupannya hampir sama. Akan tetapi ada beberapa hal yang berbeda dari mereka. Kalau suku adat Kajang itu masih belum merupakan sebuah suku, tapi masih merupakan subsuku dari Makassar. Kalau di suku Kanekes dan Baduy kan mereka sudah merupakan sebuah suku yang berdiri sendiri. Kalau Kajang itu sebenarnya adalah peninggalan sejarah Makassar masa lampau yang bisa dilihat di sana. Tidak ada bangunan tembok, tidak ada bangunan batu, tidak ada listrik, tidak ada kendaraan apapun. mereka hanya menggunakan alam untuk kelangsungan hidup mereka. Bahkan penerangan mereka pun itu dari apalagi namanya minyak sirih, tidak ada dari luar. Itu mungkin. Terima kasih.
Well, the answers is the first one is if there is a fine for the one who disobeyed the rule. There are three kinds of fines or the punishment for the people who disobeyed the rule of the Pasang Rikajang itself. The first one is the highest one, which is they are given the fine for 24 million rupiahs, and the second one is the medium fine, which is in the court custom. They will be taken in a court custom. They will be fined for about 15 million rupiahs, and also the lowest fine is about 6 million rupiahs. All the fines itself will be handed over to all the people who attended in the custom court itself. And the second question is and the next fine or the punishment is they will be taken out from the community itself to keep the relation among the people in Kajang, so that this disobedience will not be continued for the next generation of the Kajang community itself. The second question is if there is the similarity between the Kanekes and then the Kajang itself. Actually, it is relatively the same as have been mentioned, but in Kajang it is the history that from the Makassaris, and then it is the only tribes which is they have their own life. There is no wall. There is the daily life in there, especially for their home, their house. There is no wall. There is no rocks, and there is no electricity. It is relatively that they live in their own nature. They depend their daily life on the nature. But in Kanekes, it has become an independent indigenous community for the Kanekes. And if the sustainable development itself, that they believe that the human must be helpful for the other human kind. It is so if they are helpful for each other, that also the nature also will take care for the human itself. So it will keep continuing this. It will sustain the relation among the human and the relation between human and nature.
Thank you very much, Pak Andi, Buyung, for all your great answer. And thank you for all the participants too, for all your excellent questions. Our next question is from Awaluddin Shamsu again at UMI, who is interested in hearing more about the impact of the historic relationship with Makassar on Islam in Australia. Do any of the panelists have anything they could share on this topic? Or maybe Professor Campbell McKnight, perhaps you have something to add on this, Prof?
Campbell, before you add, maybe I just need to just add, because as to follow up what Pak Campbell said before, that there is actually a very important project taking place now. It's a film about Islam in Australia. The project called Before 1770. You can visit the website. It has a very rich resource about Islam and Australia, and why the trepangers actually would say that one or two, Pak Campbell, the voyage is actually always accompanied by Pak Imam, Imam, and then yes, and then when we visited Bawaka back in 2018, one of the most interesting topic that we actually discussed with our Yolŋu friends there, it's about Allah. Yeah, so the concept of God in Islam, and through the family stories, they also shared the stories about the trepangers and the Islam, and other things about the salat, you pray 5 times every day, and then they also remember these memories. So definitely it's a very they've got a very strong memories and family stories where Islam actually in Islamic and religious aspect are included in these family stories. The other thing, because in Melbourne there is Islamic Museum of Australia is located in Melbourne, and then if we for anyone who visit these very wonderful and great museums, will take to a journey of not only the history of Islam itself, but the history of Islam in Australia. And the trepangers from Makassar mentioned as a starting point about Islam in Australia. Yes, to you, Pat Campbell, if you would like to add.
Yes, that is true, of course. And I must go and visit that museum in Melbourne.
Yes, please.
At some stage. Of course, there are other Muslims too in Australia. The people from Pakistan and Afghanistan who came with the camels. And what I just discovered the other day is that there were Aboriginal people who went back to Pakistan as wives and family and are still there. Aboriginal people in Pakistan, which I never knew before, I've just discovered. So that the interaction with a variety of Muslims from different parts of the world is very important. And now, I mean, we have so many from all sorts of countries especially in the Middle East, and so many family relationships. My son has married a Muslim, not a very good Muslim, I have to say, but she's very pretty. And other family relations too. So we need to, this is a really important thing that Australia has to learn about itself. And if the trepangers can add to that, that's very, very helpful. And as you say, there's all the memory of a whole lot of prayers and so forth still remembered by Yolŋu.
Anyone wants to add?
I just add the link for the before 1770 projects. You will find this useful. Thank you.
Yeah, they're the group I was talking about before. They're very good. I like them a lot and admire what they are doing.
Hopefully we can actually we can watch the film in Australia and Indonesia next year. Yeah, it was scheduled for this year 2020, but we know that 2020 everything that we planned for 2020 need to be moved forward to 2020.
Just a note there, Lily and Campbell. Siena Stubbs has just mentioned in the chat that there is mention in Allah in the song lines of her clan in particular, her Yolŋu clan. So.
Oh, yes.
Wonderful.
There is,
all
thank you, Siena.
It's amazing the connections that we made when you visited my homeland. And
wonderful.
It's there. I've heard these song lines growing up my whole life. And when we made that connection, it was crazy to be like, oh, that's actually what they're singing about. And it's all there.
And it was so good, Siena, to hear you talk about Mungarawi, because I remember meeting in the 1960s when I was at Yirrkala.
Yeah. Your great-grandfather, right? Or your great-grandfather? Yeah, good.
Oh, thank you very much, everyone, for your excellent questions and, of course, for your excellent answer. I'm very sorry because we can't answer all of the questions due to the limited of time, but don't worry, you still can ask questions, but not for the virtual seminar, but for virtual exhibitions later on. Thank you very much for all the speakers for your valuable insights and contributions. Thank you very much for all your participants for joining us today. I hope you find this webinar informative and useful. And we hope this webinar will provide more understanding about our historical links between Australia and Indonesia, especially Makassar. And we all can play a significant role in strengthening the people and to people links between our two countries. Now, please remain seated and stay tuned for the virtual exhibitions, which will be led by the director of Rumata Artspace, Lily Yulianti. Ibu Lily, over to you.
Thank you, Lulu. So everyone, after you listen to Lulu, now Lily is here. Just a stories from our project, Global Encounters project. So we've got Lynette, Russell, Lily, myself, and then other two postdoc fellows, Leonie and Lee. So we have 4 L's for the projects. All right, so everyone, thank you for staying with us for the webinar. Such amazing opportunity to learn from each other and listening to all presenters. And now let me take you to a virtual tour to Makassar and Yirrkala in Northern Territory. Enjoy the virtual tour.
Hello everyone, welcome to Rumata Artspace. I'm Febri Hasanah, your host for today. Before we get into the gallery, I want to explain a little bit about Rumata Artspace. Rumata Artspace is a cultural institution officially established on February 2011. Rumata is famous for its featured program, for example, Screen Academy and Makassar International Writer Festival, or you know as MEWF. In 2018, Rumata held a Makassar-Yirrkala Artist Exchange Program in collaboration with Melbourne University. It's the first time I met my dearest friend, Siena Stubbs. This is my friend, Siena Stubbs. She told me how Makassan people influence her culture. It's not difficult to get along with her. We found many similarities. For example, language. Between language in Bahasa Makassar and Yolŋu Mata, or you know as Yolŋu language. I feel a connection between the place and the people. So today, we would like you to enjoy the virtual exhibition at Rumata Artspace in Makassar. Let's have a closer look into Makassan artist artwork in Rumata Artspace. The highlight of this virtual exhibition is about this wonderful artwork called Conversation of Smokes by Muhammad Rais. It is inspired by his visiting Bawaka with the other Makassan artists. Hello, Kak Rais, how are you?
Hi, Febri, I'm good. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. I'm curious about your artwork. Maybe I will start with what are you up to now?
It's just a daily routine, basically. Hang out with friends, do other clubs, and keep myself busy during this pandemic.
And you have joined this Artist Exchange program in 2018. What do you think the most interesting part of this program?
This program allows us to meet new people, visiting new places, and experiencing new things. And I was passionate about different things. And also, it's invite us to recollecting our memories about our ancestors being connected with people of Yirrkala. And that was an awesome discovered story, and yeah, it was fun.
And what is your favorite part of process making this artwork?
This artwork speaks about the connection between Makassan people and Yirrkala through the specific medium. It's a smoke, and I was inspired by the smoking process through the ritual back there.
Yeah.
And it's always I always having fun through experimenting in new media, and the smoke is kind of difficult to conquer, but it's fun, and yeah, this is it.
Yeah. And last question, how do you see the future of this relationship?
This relationship, it's about reconnecting our ancestor connection. So it's sort of like, I think it's a starting point of our people connected to Yirrkala people. And from those connections, I think we can do something else in the future. And we should doing that one. And I'm looking forward to see those coming.
Thank you, Kak Rais, for your sharing.
You're
Now
welcome.
let's see how this beautiful artwork is. What a wonderful performance from Muhammad Rais, Conversation of Smokes. Now, let's visit my dearest friend Siena in Buku Mulka Art Centre in Yirrkala.
Terima kasih, Febri. It was lovely to hear from you again. We're missing you very much here in Northeast Arnhem Land. Here we have an important piece of history that shows the relationship that we had, the Yolŋu and the Makassan people. My grandfather's grandfather was Makassan, and we have this piece of history that was found by my mother's sister, my mother. This was found at Buyung, which is my homeland, which I've heard means the mouth in the Makassan language. This piece of pottery was found there in 2004, but still to this day, we find little pieces here and there along the beach if we walk along and we find them. It's so special that we have this piece here, but this is only one piece of history, and we are continuing that history. So in 2016, we re-established that connection with the Rumata Artspace, and we have those pieces of pottery here where Yolŋu painted on them to re-establish that connection. So these are the pieces of pottery that were sent to us from Rumata back in 2016. And as you can see, they're not plain anymore. They have been painted by Yolŋu artists that we have here. This one was painted by my mother. It has the leaves of the jambang tree, the tamarind tree that you brought when we first traded back in the 1600s. And this one here was painted by a very well-known artist who has sadly passed, but it tells the story. Here, the Yolŋu traded the garpo, the gara, the dalimbo, the giant clam, the taripa, the trepang, with the Makassan, who traded the tobacco, the axes, the pottery, the swords, and the material. So this shows that story. And as you can see here, this design is painted by the older Yirrkala. This design shows the design of the sunset, the clouds, when the sun is going down, all the colors that come through. And this is the songline that is sung by all the Yirrkala clans, that when it's speaking of the departing spirit, when they leave, but they will come back again in the new cycle when they return. Like the Makassans, they will leave, but the next year, when the right winds are happening, they will return back to the Yolŋu land. And so this is a really beautiful piece that we have here in the Art Centre. Thank you so much for visiting me today. It was so lovely to have you all here, and I really hope that you felt welcomed back here, and it was so lovely to share this with you. Bye-bye. Back to you, Febri.
Thank you, Siena. And now we are back here at Rumata Artspace to talk to Saputra. Saputra is going to tell us about artworks that inspired by the relationship between Makassar and Yolŋu people. Hello, Saputra. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. What about you?
I'm feeling great. Thank you. Saputra, time is yours.
Hi, everyone. Today I'm going to show you several artworks made by Indonesian artists. These artworks are inspired by the historical relationship between Makassan trepangers and Yolŋu people in the Arnhem Land, Northern Australia. Through her artworks, Dania Sita Dewi, as the main artist, tells the story about the friendship between Makassar and Yolŋu. Meanwhile, the other two artists, Dila Pratiwi and Gina Amalia, developed fan arts based on Sita's artworks. Here you can see that the artist explored the traditional baju bodo worn by a little girl as one of a significant symbol from Makassar, also using the Makassan script named Jangang Jangang. Febri, can you read the Makassan scripts for me?
Of course, this is Taripa.
Great, correct. It's called Taripa, or you can call it as Dariba in Yolŋu language.
The baju bodo reminds me of Baini, a story that I heard when I was in Bawaka. Baini was a Mangatara or Makassan woman who lived in Bawaka. She's a beautiful young woman who protects Yolŋu people and their homeland. When arrived in Bawaka, they welcome us with smoking ceremony. They use Yirrkala, a special tree for the cleansing. They believe where Yirrkala can get the spirit out and replace it with Baini spirit to protect us. That's all from us. On behalf of Rumata Artspace, I would like to say thank you very much for your participation today. See you next time. Bye!
Okay, everyone, that was the virtual tour 2020. We made it. We went to Makassar and then visiting Bawaka. So now I would like to invite all the artists and also the videographer who are helping us here. I would like to acknowledge Yoga Pratama as our directors who make this happen. And also to our artists, Muhammad Rais, Dania Sita Dewi, Siena, and team in Yirrkala. Thank you so much. And of course, the other two artists, Gina and Dila, are they here? Not yet? All right. So if Ita can help us to present the slides. I know for some of you in Indonesia just WhatsApp me say, hey, can we just rewatch this again? Of course, we're going to upload this on our YouTube. So you can rewatch it again as many times as you like. So if anyone remember that Lulu actually mentioned about if you have questions, please just write it on a chat box, and then the most interesting question will be the lucky winner. You're going to win this beautiful artwork. This beautiful artwork to celebrate the friendship between Yolŋu and Makassar. Now, before we start the question and answer and ask several questions to our artists today, I would like to show this slide. So today we all visited Makassar, Febri in Makassar in Indonesia, and Siena in Yirrkala. So they actually 2,073 kilometers apart. Yeah. This is several pictures when Siena welcomed Febri in 2018 with the welcoming ceremony, and they just, you know, from the first sight, they just felt the connections. And now, could you please move to the next slide? Because we're going to ask Rais first, yeah, about the conversation of smokes. Rais, how are you?
Hello, Kak. I'm good. How are you?
Good, I'm fine. You in Makassar, right? Now, right, I'll just present the cylinders. Could you please go back to the cylinders first, Ita, so people can see the cylinders, the concept of the Rais performance. Could you please tell us more about this concept? And when we were in Bawaka, to be honest, I was thinking that you, as one of the artists, would actually explore the trepang as the, you know, as the main object for your artwork.
Okay.
But after returning to Makassar, you started to, you know, have this obsession with the smoke. Tell us more about that.
Okay. Like I said in the video before, I was interested in the smoke because of there's a two main reason of why I choose this smoke, because of the technical. The first one is technical reason that smokes is it's a kind of new media to play with, and not so much people to play with those smokes as a screen to project to become a projection mapping screen. So I think it's going to be fun to play with smoke. And second reason is when we are invited to celebrating the ritual back in there, those smoking parts, it's really like a touch me in the deep in my heart. So because of I don't think those smoking parts it's really strong parts of the ritual. So those two reasons keep floating in my head, and thinking about what the things that can be done with this smoke, and starting to research what kind of smoke that I use, and what the smoke can become, and finally yes, I made it like you guys can see in the screen.
Yes, and I understand that you work with dry ice. Yeah. So how do you actually find the concept? Like, I want to build two transparent cylinders, and then the video mat is excellent because there's was it a man walking inside the cylinders, and the other cylinders actually showing us the smokes with words. Yeah.
Yep.
The loan words in the Yolŋu community that actually represent Makassan influence.
Yep.
Can you tell us more about this? Smoke is the dry ice, or
oh yeah.
How did you find this concept and finalize the concept? Like, it's gonna get dry or something.
I used to try another method to produce a smoke, but I found that the dry ice is one of the longest smokes can remain in the tube. So I decide to use the dry ice. And also when I experimenting with those lights through the smoke, it's kind of have it's sort of make like a three-dimensional object. So when the images projected through the smokes, it seems to be sort of like make three-dimensional spaces. And then when I put a man walking in there, it's sort of like, wow, I can see like a real person's walking inside the tube. And also about the colors, I see when I was invited to visit Bawaka back there, I was the color of reds and yellow, it sticks in my head also. So that's why I choose the color like the yellow. It's represent the Yolŋu people. The yellow one, it represent the Yolŋu people, and the red one representing the Makassan people.
All right. So yellow for Yolŋu and red for Makassar.
Yep.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. So do you think that now everyone's now in Australia, we call it ISO, in isolation. Yeah, we are in isolation. You had the first premiere this performance in 2019, right? 2019 in July. But now, after we invited you to join this virtual tour and asking you if it's possible for you to to do the performance again in 2020, do you feel there's any like similarity, or even you find something difference this year? Because for me, yeah, myself, I see this as a symbols of isolations.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I get the point. Yeah, it's pretty much can be tell us about the situation we are faces right now. The took its kind of limitation of or just like what we are experiencing now in the COVID-19 situation. But I saw the smokes. It's the smokes. Even if if you look into the smokes, even they are isolated, but they can still move and they can still form beautiful objects. And I think we can relate those feel with it's sort of like a chemical reaction, I guess, because it's dry ice. We can addressing it to what we are currently face. Like, okay, we are in the really close and really limited situation, but I think we can still make something beautiful through it, just like smoke.
Yes, agree. Yes, this is not the end of the world. Yeah, we're in isolations, but there's a lot of things to do. Yeah, and then we actually make this happen. We do we have created the virtual tour for everyone to celebrate NAIDOC Week. Thank you, Rais. And for those who want to rewatch Rais' performance, we're going to upload this video, the virtual tour at Rumata YouTube channel. You can find us on YouTube, or you can follow us on Instagram at Rumata_Artspace. And you can also subscribe to our newsletter, because we're going to have another session with young artists, Yolŋu and Makassan artists at the weekend. So, okay, thank you, Rais. And can we move to Siena? Hi, Siena.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Could you please show us the Buyung project first? Yes. Okay. So we need to acknowledge that in the virtual tour, Siena presented the family stories actually, and then one of the Makassan artists named Abdi Karya in 2017 initiated this project called Buyung. Buyung means well, the well in Bahasa Indonesia. And it's also sponsored by Australian Consulate in Makassar, and was a part of the NAIDOC Week celebrations back then in 2017. Now, Siena, I understand that the Makassan corner at Buku-Larrŋgay Mulka Art Gallery, has a special place not only in your heart, but I think also in your gallery in the art space. Could you tell us more about the, what actually the, as a young Yolŋu artist, what actually the strongest influence for you, either as from the objects or from stories that inspired the young artists in Yirrkala?
Well, the thing is, being a young Yolŋu woman and being from my Gumatj clan, the Yirrkala clan, I have always grown up with my family, and I've always grown up going to my homeland, like I mentioned before, Bawaka, and every weekend going out there and hunting and learning from my mothers and my family. And as I grew up, I was learning more and more about the Makassan connection that we had, and always began to learn about the pottery that we could find there. And it became a game, you know, every time at sunset, going out and trying to look for the little pieces that remained at my homeland, sometimes even this small. And it's a game, you know, always looking, because after the rain season from December to March, after the rain had come, it washes away the sand and it lifts up the pieces of pottery that have been left there. And in the songlines that we have for Yolŋu people, that another reference is the Putulo Bradau, which is breaking the bottles, breaking the containers. So it's in the songs that after, when the Makassan people left, they didn't have any use for the pottery anymore. It wasn't carrying anything. So that's when they smashed the pots. And that's what we still find to this day, is this pottery. And so when Abdi came in 2007, all those years ago, we came together and we said, well, let's send some more pots. And, you know, we received them well here at Yirrkala, and the Yolŋu artists who wanted to have a connection to the Makassan people painted their stories and their relationship to the Makassan people on those pots.
Right. And when we visited Siena and family, we also joined this game, yeah? So we went for a walk along the beach, and then Siena's father actually started to challenge us to collect the pieces of these broken pots. And just a background of the story, when we reconnect again back in 2018, the art center in Yirrkala actually start to challenge us to bring more or to send more clay pots from Takalar. Takalar is 2-hour drive from Makassar, because that's actually where the oil craft men actually work producing the traditional clay pots. So what happened was, we bought boxes of clay pots from Makassar, sending these clay pots to Yirrkala, which of course very expensive at the time. It's very expensive, but we're really willing to reconstruct these connections. So the artists in Yirrkala painted them and sent the clay pots back to Makassar. Of course, it's such a a beautiful moment when we first time receiving the artworks, the clay pots from Yirrkala in 2019 again. And this is actually the pictures, one of the pictures I took when I just unboxing the clay pots. And I was nearly cried because I nearly cried because most of the clay pots, 50% of the clay pots broken. Yeah. And then when I emailed the artist and the manager at the art center and say, you know what, I'm really sad because they're all broken. And you know what the answer is? The answer was like, don't worry, Lily. It's just, the clay pot could be broken, but our relationship never be broken. So it's such a beautiful answer from people in Yirrkala, and say, just put them, make a new installation, just present all the broken clay pots, and everyone will start the conversation about this broken relationship and how we fix this broken relationship in a modern and contemporary context. So thank you, Siena. Now, can we move to the next slide? Yeah. And all right. So here, I would like to introduce you to our new friends, Dania Sita Dewi in Bekasi, Jakarta, and 2 other artists, Dila Pratiwi and Gina Amalia. So we just found Dila, Gina, and Sita's artwork through Google Alert. thanks to David, thanks to David in Global Encounters team, that one day David emailed me and said, hey, do you know this? This is such an amazing artwork. So yes, and Fikri approached these three young artists, and what I found very interesting that the Sita especially is very obsessed with history. Yeah, can you tell us more about this? And before you answer, this is actually one question from Sita when I invited Sita to join this virtual tour, and Sita told me, "Well, I'm thrilled that I can join this virtual tour, but with one condition: would you be able to lend me Campbell McKnight books, The Voyage to Marenge?" Sita, no, you are in the same forum with Campbell McKnight, so you can you can ask him directly. And of course, we're going to send the book for you in Indonesia. Well, Sita, tell us about this, because I understand you're not a Makassan. You never been to Australia, but how did you find these historical relationships?
Okay. First of all, I'm very thrilled and very appreciated to be invited into this NAIDOC, and because it has been my passion to draw comics, especially drawing the Makassan and Yolŋu relationship, and to be invited into the conversation, I'm so blessed. My first, why I start the Makassan and Yolŋu is due to my research for comic material. I have a web comic at the time, and I accidentally discovered about the Makassan connection with Yolŋu, because previously we thought that our sailormen, especially Bugis people from Makassar, are very renowned as explorer and trader, and we only thought that they only trade along ASEAN seas. They didn't explore down below to Australia and New Zealand at first. And then when I found this connection, I found it, oh, this is fascinating. And lots of things pops up into my head, like, oh, if the Yolŋu people collaborate together, oh, maybe they visit other places too. Maybe they went to China together with Makassan, or so many scenarios, because at that time, there's a lot of maritime activities along the Indian Ocean trade. So it is very interesting, and I'm very happy to be, I learned a lot in this virtual tour as well, about the pottery, and then about from Siena. And I got to know, and especially I got to meet Professor
Campbell McKnight. Campbell, would you like to say hello to me? He's a big fan of you.
I'm a big fan. You're my only, because I have limited resources for this. My only source for research is your book about Journey to Marenge. And I have no, since I'm positioned in Java, I don't have connection to Makassar or to Yolŋu community. So I'm very happy to meet Siena. I'm very happy to collaborate with her and collaborate with Lily. And it's lots of funny things happen because we have different time zones. So sometimes there are differences in our, and but we work out very well. I'm very, very appreciated. And these are the artworks that we created together. As you can see, it's shown here. These are inspired by, this is made by my friend Gina. She's the artist for these two artworks. And the letters are in Makassan script, Lontara. Yes, Bu Lili, right? Lontara.
Yes, Lontara, yes.
We got a lot of help. We got a lot of help about the writings, and then these the engraving and the motif was in part inspired by Siena as well. At that time, Siena showed us the pottery and the design. So, oh, we can make something like that. We try to incorporate. So there's this cultural exchange between us. But we always like to ask for permission first, of course, because we want to be culturally appropriate as well. So
yes,
this communication is very, very helpful, and we get to learn a lot.
Yes, It reminds me with Ciela questions from the webinar. Yes, what actually the role of millennials and young people to maintain these historical relationships? Well, during the virtual tour process, yeah, I'm actually the only non-young people person in this group, and then I'm really thrilled to see their energy. They share all these ideas and initiatives, and like, hey, let's make this happen, because we only we are encouraged to stay at home, and but why don't we do something that to connect this virtually. So can we move to the next artwork, because we've got other artworks. Hi Gina, Gina is there.
Hi Gina.
Yeah, and Dila, this is from Dila Pratiwi, and everyone, the artwork that's going to be for one lucky winner today. Yes, one of the artwork is gonna be yours if you're a lucky winner. The one in the middle, yeah, so cute. Now, can you tell us about the Dila's artwork? It feels for me it's influenced by Japanese anime.
Oh yes. Oh, okay. So
can we? Yeah.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
So the beginning of this artwork, it was in 2014. At that time, we make a web comic together about Australia and Makassar, Yolŋu and Makassar. And these are the characters. So these are the characters in the web comic, Makassar and Yolŋu. That's the name given because at that time we would like to create a personification of the culture of the communities. So we only gave the name Yolŋu and Makassar to easier to differentiate. And it's a girl and a boy, and is like trying to convey about their relationship through a Japanese styled anime and comic, and put it on a web comic in DeviantArt in 2014. And
sure.
Yes, it's quite
very interesting. It's very interesting, Sita. While you answering the question, people keep typing in the chat box saying, "Can I have that artwork? This is so cute, lovely." Now,
this is
we're going to produce. Yes. With these young artists, we're actually going to continue our journey after the virtual tour to create the stories, and then really want to connect with general public to share this history through comic. Because I remember when you publish your artworks through the one of the platform, I remember a few years ago, you eventually actually reached 700,000 views.
Yes, we have a lot of
and
viewers.
Then you have a global fans. Oh my goodness, you are so famous.
It's a long time ago.
A long time ago.
And I'm very surprised it got brought up again, because at that time we only thought that, oh, maybe it's only us who is interested in this connection. So when I was contacted by Bu Lili, hey, about your artwork, Makassar and Yolŋu, I'm happy again, because there's people who care about this connection. Oh, I would like to resurrect it again and maybe continue the comic where it ends. So I'm very excited.
You can actually participating in Global Encounters project, because we need to reach out people out there and telling the shared history. All right. So everyone, thank you for your excellent questions for our artists. Please keep them coming. Our first couple of questions are gonna read this question. First for Rais. Hi Rais, are you still there? This is yes, couple of questions for Rais. Naomi is interested to know what inspired you to connect the traditional and modern to make the conversation of smoke. So the element, the traditional element, the traditional and the modern element. What actually the inspiration behind this?
Probably the things that I can answer is because I play a lot for the recent 2 years about this contemporary medium about the projection mapping, like installation and stuff like that. And also when I was back there at the Bawaka, we are invited to perform rituals. We asking to dance together with them and to see the sunset. It's one of the Yolŋu people talking about our ancestor is also doing those rituals back there, and I was amazed about this is how they celebrate their friendship back in there. And also I think those two parts about the traditional rituals and what I been doing recently about the technology and modern stuff, I can mix together and become something that you guys can see on the screen, but those as artwork. So the combination of what I experiencing about the traditional rituals that I experiencing back there and what I doing right now, it's the main inspiration of doing this artwork.
Right, thank you. And I think from Leonie, Rice already answered your question about the colors. The colors comes from the from Yolŋu. Yellow colors is from Yolŋu, and Makassan actually represent with red colors. Yeah, I've got a table of the colors of lights. I'm gonna say later on after this event. So questions from Fikri. This is for everyone. Maybe I would like to ask Siena first. Yeah. So how it feels to be able to create artwork based on past Makassan Yolŋu interactions, and what impression this has had on you as an artist. Siena, maybe you can ask this first. Answer this. Thank you. You are mute, Siena.
Like we've been saying this whole time, like we've been saying this whole time, it's all about reestablishing that connection that our ancestors had. And, you know, it was a different way back then because we didn't have technology for animating or filming, but now we can keep continuing that same connection, but in a new way. And it's very exciting.
All right. And how about you, Sita? Sita and friends?
Yeah, same with Siena. I'm very happy to be reconnected with everyone, and everyone has been very generous with giving feedback and sharing their stories and information. I'm very happy. It's great.
Yeah, so you recreating new history. Yeah. Well, okay.
New connections.
Yeah, new connections, new history for our future generations, of course. Yes. Now, you receive a lot of questions about the artwork because they're so cute, so cute. So this is for Dila and Gina. For Dila and Gina, how long it takes for you to make the artworks, especially the research part? You can answer in Bahasa if you like. Gina and Dila. Are you here? Or perhaps because you work as a group, Sita, could you please answer this?
Oh, okay, all right. The comic in itself, it takes around 1 month of research because I would like to know about the connection and then the trade work, the trade route, and about the we gathered academic sources, especially Professor Campbell's book. We have to read it first before we delve into the story, and Gina and Dila are the one who do the coloring and the great artwork that they did. I only do the line arting, just the comic output. But the research itself is around 1 month, but the comic drawing, we usually produce the web comic once a week. So we put the pages once a week. It goes on from 2013 until 2014.
All right, and about your new connections with Siena and other artists in Yirrkala, tell us more about that, because this is just a recent friend, it's very recent, like we email you and then you reply back, and then I reach Siena and say, hey Siena, I really need you to know these girls, they're so talented and they're really interested in your history. Tell us more about that.
Yes,
the creative part.
Yes, because we were recently just contacted by Bu Lili. It was like a few months ago, and we just know about NAIDOC. So we would like to resurrect back our comic because we don't have enough time. We animated it and using a voiceover, using the Yolŋu Mata, the Yolŋu language, as well as English with mix of Makassan language, and we're going to show it later, ya Bu, in
yes,
the next
of course.
event.
We have a different event, especially for the comics. For those, I think you already have new fans during this event, Siena, Gina, and Dila.
I'm really hoping that we can keep working together, and in the future,
yes, of course.
This is just my hope. Yeah, I would like to, especially now that I know Siena, I would like to learn more about Yolŋu, and then about Bu Lili as a Bugis, and she's from Makassar. She knows a lot about ship and then the trade route. I would like to learn a lot from her and other researchers, so we can make a new comic, a better, more professional looking comic. And if it's possible, we can brought it up for the next event.
Yeah, sure. This is actually good news for everyone, because Rumata Artspace and Makassar International Writers Festival is going to launch Story Lab project. So Story Lab project is a huge, ambitious project to connect historians, researchers, people from academic world to tell the stories with the help of the artists like you guys. And then the Story Lab actually going to work with young people. So how to connect young people from different parts of the world, and then learn the history through pop cultures and other creative projects like this. So definitely, and for those who already comment on how the artworks and things, of course, we're going to send you invitation for our next event, because Siena and Sita, Dila, and Gina are going to share their cross-cultural experience. Yeah, it's very important because as I explained before, that Sita actually lives in Jakarta, has no connection with Makassar at all, never been to Australia, learn about the history by reading Pak Campbell McKnight's book, and asking me in return, okay, I'm joining your project, Bu Lili, but could you please send me the book? I'll send one copy for you from Melbourne. Sure. And now I would like to ask one last question to our director, Yoga. Yoga, are you here? Where is Yoga? Yoga and Abi. Yeah, we have Abi Nur Abdiansa, the man behind the artistic elements of this virtual tour. And also I would like to say hello to Febri. Febri, thank you for your contribution, such a beautiful stories about your friendship with Siena. Yeah, Yoga, could you please share the story behind the scenes? Of course, it's not easy to work in such a limited time, and then coordinating everyone to be involved in this virtual tour?
Okay, I won't explain too much about my behind the scene production. Only I want to share. I want to say that this is the first time I did. This is the first time I did a virtual exhibition in filming. I filming the virtual exhibition, and the hardest thing is that I should connect Makassar to Australia.
Yirrkala.
Yeah, Yirrkala, especially Yirrkala. So at the time, Miss Lily asked me, "Yok, do you have an idea to connect the between Makassar and Australia?" And then I was thinking that how it's so hard. So that if you watch the video last time, I only used the method that it called masking method. So I used the door. Maybe this is only the best things that I can use.
Yes.
Okay, only that. Okay.
Yeah. So if everyone remember that one of the transition part in the video. So Febri say, now let's visit Siena in Yirrkala. Well, actually that's Yoga's ideas, yeah, to put Siena and Febri in one frame. Wow, that's beautiful. Well, and last but not least, for Abi, do you have comments? Because you're actually the man behind all these artistic directions to how actually we see these connections and the artist involvement as key players in the storytelling.
Yeah, thank you everyone. From now we have many resources about this. Many resources about this relationship, and I'm very happy because
we can't hear you.
We don't have.
I think you cut off, Abi. That's fine. Maybe you can chat. Perhaps you can actually just write your comments so everyone can read it in the chat box. All right, everyone. So it's very interesting to finally make this happen and present it as a part of NAIDOC Week 2020 celebrations. So once again, thank you for everyone who are helping us and is such important contributions for the artists, Dania Sitadewi, Dila and Gina, also Siena and teams and friends at Yirrkala. Yoga, of course, thank you so much, Yoga, to make this happen. Abi for helping us. There's a lot of people actually involved behind this. And of course, Rais, we are looking forward. We are looking forward to see your next performance, of course. And now I would like to say thank you to everyone. I hope you enjoyed the virtual tour, and we're going to upload the virtual tour at Rumata Artspace YouTube for you to rewatch after this event. Now, I'll hand over this to Lulu again. We have last but not least element in this event, yeah, Lulu, to announce the winner.
Yeah, that's true. So how was the virtual exhibition and the artist talk, everyone? I bet you enjoyed as much as I do. Thank you very much for all the great artists and of course, Ibu Lily. We are now coming to the end to announce the winner to the giveaway. Are you ready? Well, we don't have, I'm sorry. All right, let's welcome the Consul General, Ms. Bronwyn Robbins, to announce the winner. Yes, please, Consul General.
Thank you, Lulu, and thank you, everyone. Wow, what a fabulous performance. What an interesting webinar and fabulous performance and terrific discussion with the artists. So thank you very much. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I have. And after this fabulous event, I have the great pleasure to award a prize, as we said at the beginning of this event, that we would award a prize to the most interesting question during our question and answer session. And this is the prize. You've seen the picture, but I'll just hold it up so we know who the what the prize will be. And I have to say there have been some terrific questions, and the committee thought long and hard about this and argued who would be the winner. But I'm very proud to announce that the winner will be Alwadin Samsu, sorry, I don't think I pronounced that very well, at UMI, who asked a great question about the influence of the historic Yolŋu Makassar relationship on modern day Australia, and then followed that up with a question on the impact the relationship has had on Islam in Australia. Both are really excellent questions. So congratulations to you. So we shall hand this over to you virtually, and Ibu Lily will hand it over through the post, I believe. So congratulations once again, and thank you very much everyone for joining us today. We really hope you enjoyed it. Terima kasih.
Thank you very much, Consul General, to virtually award Awaludin Shamsu as the winner, and congratulations for the winner. Please contact the committee for your gift delivery. Ibu Lily and I are honored to be a host for today's webinar and virtual exhibition. We hope you enjoy the webinar and the virtual exhibition and find it useful. We hope to see you again in the future for sure. Now, before the session, we will hold a photo session. To the Consul General, keynote speakers, as well as participants, you are welcome to take a position. Okay.
How do we do the photo? All right, we just...
Well, actually, I don't know how to do it, but let's
for
try.
Our Australians, for our Australian friends, this is an Indonesian Zoom style, yeah? We have to get the photo at the end of the event.
I think we should take a few times. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, it's Emma from the Consul General here as well. Could everybody who doesn't have their cameras on at the moment, please put their camera on, and then we can take a photograph of everybody all together who's participating in today's webinar and virtual exhibition.
Are we ready?
Yeah. Okay, I think someone might need to change it so that it's in gallery view, because at the moment I think I can only see one participant.
Yep,
it's on gallery view right now. All right, I can take pictures with my phone.
I've got to screen for the gallery.
Okay, I can help you guys. Do you want me to take pictures?
Sure.
1, 2, 3.
Is there any NAIDOC symbol or what?
But I don't know how to, to see everyone. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. And of course, if you want to get connected with Rumata Artspace, we are on Instagram, Rumata_Artspace. And of course, with Konjen Makassar. So, follow Konjen Makassar on Instagram as well. They're also on Twitter and Facebook. And thank you for joining us today to celebrate NAIDOC Week 2020.
Happy NAIDOC Week, everyone. Bye.
Happy NAIDOC Week, everyone.
Happy
Bye-bye.
NAIDOC Week. Bye.